Chapter 17, Moon Cabin. Owning the Shadow. It was time to go within, to face my inner darkness. As Belvy and Didon expressed, the journey takes us into our inner depths, and it's within that dark womb that transformation occurs. I had run from the shadow my entire life. But now, there was nowhere else to go but into it. My teacher had said, "You yourself are what you're looking for." Finally, I thought, I'm looking in the right place. There were parts of myself I needed to reclaim, and other parts I needed to let go. As I was leaving Sunlight's house, she said to me, "The world you see is a reflection of who you are. When you own your wholeness, the world reveals its oneness." I traveled north to the cabin in the forest that she had arranged for me to stay in. She said to me, "The forest is dark in the winter. It's a good place to see what you need to see." And I knew what she meant. The winter meant low outer light, and so I'd have to see into the darkness by way of an inner light. I was already seeing myself and the world very differently. The world was not full of enemies out to attack me, as I had often thought. The confrontation was now more internal than external. I had read in the book Power versus Force that any single individual devoted to inner transformation helps to relieve the suffering of the world. Dr. Hawkins writes, "In this interconnected universe, every improvement we make in our private world improves the world at large for everyone." That statement gave me the courage to peer into my private world, which was much vaster than I'd ever expected. In the heart of that darkness lay the buried treasure. As Carl Jung had written, the gold is in the shadow. The Katha Upanishad describes it this way: that boundless power, source of every power, manifesting itself as life, entering every heart, living there among the elements, that is self, capital S. That being, no bigger than a thumb, burning like a flame without smoke, maker of past and future, the same tomorrow as today, that is self, capital S. The self, the inner gold, the soul, the eternal essence, primordial oneness. I wasn't sure what I would have to confront to find it, that great it, self, soul, but I was willing. The cabin was off the grid, several miles into the forest, down an unpaved road. It was called the Moon Cabin. The symbolism of the name wasn't lost on me. Moon signified the yin consciousness of solitude and stillness. The cabin itself was austere. No electricity, no indoor plumbing, no cell phone reception, no computer, no internet, no email. At night, I lit a kerosene lamp to read by. Water from a spring was carried by gravity through a little hose to an outdoor sink on the porch. That was the water source. I had to hike downhill through snow to get to the compost toilet. I heated the cabin with a wood stove. I had read the book Cave in the Snow, which was about Jetsumna Tenzin Palmo's 12-year retreat of solitude in a small cave high up in the Himalayas. In her Tibetan Buddhist tradition and many other pathways, such periods of retreat are recommended for a spiritual seeker. You leave the outer world behind to go explore the inner one. The work is done in solitude. yet is never for oneself alone. Palmo told me she hadn't gone to the cave just for herself. Whatever clarity she had attained, she told me, it had been for all beings. Now, to be honest with you, I was far from that level. My initial motives were self-serving. I thought self-realization, that's a great goal to achieve. I imagined blissful states of satori, samadhi, and the like. These fantasies of cosmic spiritual attainments, achievements, they were instantly nipped in the bud by the reality of the stark setting once I arrived. I had barely unpacked my van, and terror crept over me. What hubris to imagine I would blissfully probe the cosmic darkness when I could barely peer into the coming night. It was my first night alone since pouring out all of my alcohol. For years, my evening habit was to drink myself into a slumber, aka blackout, as I would engage in one distraction after another: internet, socializing, working, etc. But here in the moon cabin, there was no way to distract myself, and I had no alcohol. I was miles into the forest, totally alone in this cabin with no electricity, no phone, no internet service, nothing. As I stood in the starkness and company of my own naked self, terror struck. I had nowhere to escape. I had nothing to drink. I started to panic. Oh God, what if I die of a heart attack out here in the boonies? What if negative forces overtake me? The fearful thoughts compounded. When I had been parked on Sunlight's land, sleeping in my camper van, I could just get up and go knock on her door if I was scared. But now, it was just I, all alone with my jagged fear. The mind spun scenes of disaster. It said, if you stay here, death is certain. I thought, maybe I'd better pack up and leave before night comes. But from somewhere in me came my teacher's words. All fear is illusion. Walk straight ahead no matter what. So I decided to stay in the cabin and put this teaching to a test. The key was to not resist the feelings of fear. He had told me, if you let go of resisting the feeling, the energy will dissipate. I was frightened to feel the feelings of fear, and now I was supposed to let them come and even welcome them and ask for more of them? I sat down and I did it because I trusted him. I felt the energy of fear move through my body. You know how the pulse is racing, adrenaline is pumping, palms sweating. I remembered his teaching to not label the sensations with a concept like heart attack. Instead, he said to let go of all the mental ideas and labeling of it and just stay on the edge of the moment. Go into the experience of the energy of the feeling itself, just focusing on the sensations in your body, like pulse, sweat, and aware of the breath. I did this. I did it to the best of my ability in that moment. I stepped back from the panic as if I were watching it from a distance. I let the wild and catastrophic thoughts run and run and run, and shifted attention to the sensations themselves. Pulse, sweating, and I stayed aware of my breath. I would say legs wanting to run, pulse racing, forehead sweating. Just observation of the sensations. And without resisting the feeling of fear and the whole sensation experience, I simply sat there and let the energy run its course through my body. And before nightfall, that inner pressure was released. Something had broken free. This was an inner victory that I'd never had before. I had been terrified of something, and yet I hadn't run away. And I hadn't tried to numb it with a drink or distracting myself. Inside of myself, I had found something that could handle the terror. I had stayed the course, and I hadn't died from fear. I felt elated. This is the genuine high of trusting the higher self. It was magnificent. It was an inner pathway to freedom that had revealed itself. Facing that terror was the first of many times during my solitude in the cabin when I had to work with feelings that I found difficult. Some nights it was grief, other nights it was guilt or anger, fear, and always more fear would come up for me. My teacher, you see, had been a psychiatrist. He taught a clinical approach to inner phenomena. I remembered his statement when he said, "You don't have to believe everything you think. You don't have to act on every feeling you have." No one has to be ruled by their mind with its parade of subjects and endless streams of options. They are all disguised as memories, fantasies, fears, concepts, etc. It's always a choice whether to believe in the thought stream or not. See, that put the power in my hands. This clinical approach made it possible for so-called forbidden or repressed shadow elements in my psyche to come to the surface. We all know that if we feel judged, we will hide. Well, the same is true for the inner parts of ourself. They will hide from our condemning superego. And then they become the backseat drivers that we never see. As the saying goes, what you resist persists. I let go of resisting the shadow elements, the thoughts, the feelings in myself. And I face the truth of Viktor Frankl's point that inside of me, there is a Mother Teresa and Hitler. I recognize the Hitler part of me. It would like to destroy the enemy. It would love to be adored and to rule over others. That's inside of me. I also recognize the Mother Teresa part of me that actually is capable of giving my whole heart to love, to touch the untouchables, and to go to great lengths to care for a total stranger. Owning that inner despot, that inner Hitler, was a turning point for me. And I recalled a story from Didon Gills. It was the moment when he realized that the very hatred he despised in his enemy was also inside of him. He had come across a photograph that showed a horrible lynching. He described his response. It was an African-American man being burned at the stake. A group of white people stood around him in nice clothes, like they had just been to church or something. Even the little girls had on nice white dresses. I sat down and I looked at that photograph for a real long time. And at some point, it dawned on me that I was actually everybody in that picture. I was the man being burned, that is the victim, and I had the potential within me to be the perpetrator. Because when I looked at that picture, seeing those white people standing there in their nice Sunday clothes, I was filled with rage, and I thought I could kill them all, even the children. I had to be honest with myself and say that there are moments when I have the potential to be the one being lynched and the one that's the lyncher. It wasn't easy for me to say that or accept it in myself. Having owned the lyncher in himself, Didon stopped hating his enemy, and he found a way forward in his life that included everyone. As he writes in his poem, The Middle Passage, "In my centuries of suffering, I embody the whole." And it's here that Sunlight's wisdom became apparent to me when she said, "If you can face your own darkness, Fran, and come to love all that you discover there, then you will be a force for good in this world." And so I went deeper into that darkness. Seeing the log in your own eye. It was a long winter in the moon cabin. Snow covered the ground most of the time. I rarely saw sunshine through the clouds and trees. The cabin's isolation accentuated the loneness of my journey. Chilly winds blew through the walls, so I kept close to the wood stove. The fire became my friend. I gave it wood, and it gave back warmth. Love is a fire. This is the mystical saying that came to life for me. The fire symbolized the love of my teacher, whose energy was transforming me. When I put a piece of wood into the fire, I imagined that I was surrendering something of myself. Opinions, hatreds, self-identities, sorrows, resentments, fears, into the fire of his love to be transformed. The exercise was cathartic. Putting one log after another into the fire, I was reminded of Jesus' saying about the hypocrites who see the speck in the eye of another, but don't even notice the big log in their own eye. I had spent most of my life going after the speck in the eyes of others, oblivious to the log in my own eye. The surrender was gradual, one log at a time. Some of the mental, emotional patterns had carried a lifetime of suffering. Surrendering them to the fire, I watched as the logs popped, caught flame, and burned to ash. The relief was immense. One of the biggest logs I surrendered into the fire was my blaming of others. They did it to me. They are to blame for my misery. This was the victim-perpetrator paradigm. Us versus them. Sunlight had gotten me to see that the faults I saw in others, well, they were also in me. Prejudice, intolerance, wanting to control others, things like that. In my litanies of what others had done to me, I had been utterly blind to the log in my own eye. The truth of Sunlight's statement became obvious to me. Fran, one day you will see that the enemy is not another person or group. It's the ignorance in all of us. I could stop pointing the finger of blame. Ignorance is no one's fault, is it? It's part of our human condition, and no one escapes it. I began to feel compassion for myself and for all of humankind. And I thought of that old minister who had told me I had the devil inside of me when I was 15. Truly, how could he have known that the light was love? When had he ever been taught to trust such spiritual experiences? He had been ignorant, and out of ignorance, we are afraid. I put my log of blaming the minister into the fire. And this was just the beginning for me. Reviewing my entire life, the idea of karma hit me on a visceral level. As a Westerner, I'd never been exposed to karma, yet it was notable in such sayings, what goes around comes around. You reap what you sow. And I'd read about karma in my teacher's books, but it really didn't sink in till I was all alone in the forest, listening to those logs crackle in the fire. Karma was not predeterminism, my teacher said, because we always have free will. Rather, it means that we have certain karmic propensities that increase the likelihood of what may arise for us. Karma, we might say, is a shorthand term for the totality of all the factors present at our birth, physical and spiritual. Alone in the cabin, I was confronted with this question. What if all of the negativities I had experienced in my life were actually a reflection of what I had done to others in another time and place? My teacher said that many human incarnations acquaint us with a range of experiences, and this exposure evolves our consciousness. Unless we walk a mile in their shoes, how can we ever understand? And when I was with him, I had that feeling that he knew all of humanity from firsthand experience. He had compassion for every situation because he knew what it was like to be that in some lifetime. He spoke of his many lifetimes as chapters in the same book, and he recounted various lives and deaths that he had experienced in other bodies, in other historical eras, and in other countries. He gave the personal example of slavery when he was chained to the oars of a slave ship. Here is his account. I remember vividly the exact details of the entire experience. I remember that the pain and suffering reached a point of non-tolerance. The slave master became enraged at me, extremely savage. Not only was it brutal, but on that ship, there was no sanitary facility. Everyone defecated and urinated right where they sat at the oars. I can remember being at the point of breaking, that I could not tolerate it anymore. I suddenly let go of the body and went out of the body. I realized I could never be imprisoned. I was free. I validated my spiritual reality. I showed that SOB and I just died on him. Yes, take that. That was the purpose of that lifetime. They can catch my body, but never my spirit. He explained to me, each one of us takes turns being a master or a slave, being the exploited or the exploiter. He himself had been a pirate who killed others out of greed, and he had been a slave exploited by the greed of others. He said that each lifetime serves a specific purpose for us to learn certain lessons and undo any harm we had done to others. As Tenzin Palmo told me, from a Buddhist perspective, we've all had endless lifetimes in all kinds of forms, genders, nationalities, everywhere. And during those times, we've done everything. We've done good, bad, and indifferent. You name it, we've all done it. The old paradigm I'd believed in my whole life, it cast me in the role of a self-righteous victim. I had been rejected by others, I thought. They were the perpetrators. But karma, that puts a different frame on the whole experience. It suggested the possibility that victim and perpetrator are roles that we actually trade from lifetime to lifetime to help each other evolve by presenting the option of compassion and forgiveness. Such a view, of course, does not negate the need to take proper legal action against harmful people or distance oneself from harmful people. For instance, earlier in my life, I had needed to get a restraining order to protect myself from someone who threatened to kill me. Now, a karmic view helped me to see that person in a more compassionate light. As my teacher taught me to say this prayer, forgive the one in me who has ever done this to another. I didn't need to believe in karma as a religious doctrine. In order to apply the karmic principle, we reap what we sow. It seemed to be inherent to nature. I mean, if I planted parsley seeds in the soil, I would see parsley plants one day, not pumpkins. It made sense to me that whatever actions I had sown in the soil of my life, I would reap the consequences of those actions somewhere down the line. This view of life cleared out a lifetime of resentment and self-pity. Over the coming years, however, I learned never to suggest karma to other people. Matters of belief are precious. I have no business tinkering around with the life supports that other people rely on. Whether their beliefs are religious or secular, such beliefs are the rafts that carry us through the voyage of our lives. They give us the meaning we need to endure the heat and burden of the day. There's no love in criticizing someone else's belief or even telling others about a spiritual principle like karma that they might find disagreeable or upsetting. I find it liberating, but many people think karma is a hard pill to swallow. I had once been a missionary who crossed the world to convert others to my sect. I have since learned to let people have their own destiny, whatever they think is best for them. How can I know what is best for others? And neither is karma an excuse for some detached indifference to suffering. Like you hear it said, oh, it's just their karma. Oh, goodness, no. It simply revealed for me the need for unconditional compassion, for we humans are painfully at the effect of countless causes and conditions that we can't see. It's understandable that we often feel as if life were unfair, unjust. Following in the steps of Belvy-Brooks and Deedon Gills, I wanted to feel the whole human race as my family. My teacher taught me that love is the ultimate law of the universe and that every person has some good karma somewhere. So if someone calls out for help from the utter depths of their being, they will be heard. He also spoke of this world as having a karmic unity, all of us together. Even as he encouraged the recognition of our individual karmic inheritance, his teaching always went beyond the personal self to the greater allness of life. As he said, the cause of anything is always the same. It's the totality of all that exists now and ever has existed throughout all of time. Alone in the forest, I touched into that allness. I validated for myself the discovery that many meditators make. It's not necessary to try to stop thoughts and feelings through force, as if we could. It's only necessary to shift attention away from thoughts and feelings. We do this by means of the breath, or a mantra, a visualization, a movement, an invocation of the divine name. Through those means, we shift our attention away from the thoughts and feelings. My teacher taught me, be the field and not the content of the field. He likened the content to clouds and the field to the blue sky. Focus on the sky, not the clouds. The clouds come and go. They intensify and disperse. But the sky is never affected by the movement of the clouds. The sky is the field, the self, capital S, silent, changeless, and vast. My attention shifted to the silence underneath all sounds. The silence was found to be always, everywhere. There was the crackling of the fire, the creaking of the cabin when the wind blew, the pattering of the rain on the metal roof. All of these sounds registered into an infinite silence, which was the witness that never slept. It was the space in which everything began and ended, and itself had no beginning or ending. In the cabin, I began to notice this difference. When I took the perspective of a personal me, the ego, anxiety was common. There was a continuous stream of content, all my thoughts, emotions, memories, images. I was rarely content. But when the focus shifted to the underlying silence of the field, peace prevailed. It was a shift from personal ego to presence, capital P, from knower to known. Instead of watching, I was being watched. Instead of hearing, I was being heard. Instead of breathing, I was being breathed. The silence was aware of everything and rejected nothing. As winter gave birth to spring, I was still at the moon cabin and began to take walks outside. There was the same all-pervading presence. Infinite silence. One day, I walked down the hill to a little creek, and I heard myself walking. I heard the leaves crunching, the body breathing. It wasn't the personal I that heard those footsteps, but something, capital S, something else heard. It was an impersonal awareness that was silently present. Shifting from the me to the greater we of the forest, I knew that the trees were aware of me. All I did was follow my teacher's instruction to shift from the content of sound, thoughts, movement, to the field of silent awareness and space. The silence and space had always been there, as if waiting to be identified with. Life was alive in ways I hadn't known. The water, the trees, the stones, and the air were actually aware of my presence. All was the presence. Over the years to come, these kind of brief moments of awe continued to occur. I experienced them most readily in the presence of my teacher when I was with him. One time I was standing with him near a tree, and he said, "The tree knows when love walks by." In the oneness of existence, he said, knower and known are one. All that exists serves all that exists. He would often begin his public lectures by saying, "Nothing causes anything. Everything arises spontaneously by virtue of what it is." Such statements planted a seed of awareness in me that's still growing. The self, capital S, is within, awaiting realization. This is what Sadhguru Vasudev told me. Self-realization does not unfold by way of a fight, certainly not a personal achievement, and not even an outer discovery. He said to me, you can only realize what's already there inside of you.